Hey guys, Zach Tutorials, and today I'm going to be starting my beginner series for modding. I know that a lot of you have wanted to see this because basically everybody has a starting point, but there's not such great resources to start out modding. It can be a hard time, so that's why I'm here. Today I'll be talking about, what jailbreaking is and what a custom firmware is, more importantly, and all that. So this is just the kind of small introduction to the series, but also, the information in this video will be useful to basically anyone who has a PS3 system, not for people who are just looking into modding. This is useful information for anybody. So let's get right in. I'm just going to talk about some key terms first. So we have official firmware. Well, actually, before I get into this, I want you to know what a firmware is. This FW here, this firmware. So what's a firmware? It's basically the version of your PS3 software that it's on. So as of right now, when I'm making this video, the latest version of your PS3 is 4.70. If you're watching this video, it may be higher than that, but when I'm making this video, it's 4.70. That's the latest firmware. So what's an official firmware? Basically, it's a firmware that's been released by Sony. It's literally official. It's the name makes sense. So Sony, it's something made by Sony. It's official. It's original. It's released, not leaked. Okay, so this is what any regular PS3 would have. If you keep your PS3 up to date, you have an official firmware. What's a custom firmware? Okay, custom firmware, or CFW, which you'll often see abbreviated. A custom firmware is not made by Sony. Basically, it's a firmware that is modified. It's taken from original firmware, and there's stuff added to it, there's stuff changed, which allows you to do other things that you wouldn't have been able to do before. You might also see modded firmware, MFW, sometimes. Essentially, it's the same thing as custom firmware. Alright, these two are pretty much the same thing. But generally, the firmwares that I use are custom firmwares. Okay, so basically, also, this is kind of a synonym to a jailbreak as well. If your PS3 is jailbroken, it is on a custom firmware. That's basically what it is. So now we have these two different terms. Okay, so what's CEX or CAX? Well, basically, this is a retail PS3 system. This is, any PS3 you buy off the shelves or whatever, regular PS3 retail. Okay, that's the main word you need to know, retail. CEX goes with retail. What's DEX? DEX is developer. This is not a regular PS3. This is a PS3 used by developers. This is used by people who make games for Sony, and it's used by Sony themselves. It allows you to do a lot of cool different things that you would not be able to do on CEX, but it can be more complicated, and I'll get into more depth in another video about CEX versus DEX. Also, you can convert from CEX to DEX, which I've made a video on as well. So that's a lot of basic knowledge you should know, you should need to know. And requirements, there's really only one. Your PS3 system must be on firmware 3.55 or below. And as you can notice, I underlined this, starred it, put it in red. This is extremely important. You have to get this in your head. You have to understand this. If your PS3 is on the latest version and up to date, that is not a good thing. You cannot jailbreak it. You cannot get a custom firmware at all whatsoever. But the only thing that you can do, and this does not work for everybody, but you can downgrade your PS3 by using something called an E3 flasher. So here, I'll just spell it out for you. So E3 flasher. So that's how you spell it, E3 flasher. Basically, this is a hardware that you can install into your PS3, and when I say hardware, I mean you have to take apart your PS3 and install it and stuff. So I haven't done it personally. I don't know how difficult it is, but I don't think it should be that hard. And why I say this is not for everyone, basically, if your system was made after 3.55, then it can't be downgraded to 3.55. So there's actually a certain model number of PS3s that can be downgraded to 3.55. I think all fat PS3s can be, if I'm not mistaken, and some slims can. I'm pretty sure that 2500 or below for slims can be downgraded, but I'm not so sure. Go search that up. Anyway, if you are not on 3.55, there's a possibility you could downgrade. Also, if you have a super slim, there's a 0% chance you cannot downgrade a super slim PS3. Okay, so now that you know all this kind of stuff, this basic requirement, all this kind of stuff. We could get into it. So here's my PS3 screen. I'm first going to show you how to check what firmware you are on. If you're on 3.55, you should already know that, but just in case, go to System Settings, scroll down to System Information, click, and it should say 3.55. If it's anything above that, then you have to downgrade or you can't do anything about that. So how do you install a custom firmware or a jailbreak or whatever you want to call it? Well, if you're on 3.55, the first thing you want to do is install something like a custom firmware called Kmeow. Spelled like this, Kmeaw. It's just a 3.55 custom firmware, very, very basic. But from there, you can install other custom firmwares, which will give you online access. But first, this is what's important. You gotta install something like Kmeow. So how do you install custom firmware? First, you want to go ahead and open up your USB. I'm just going to delete this folder real quick and show you how to do this. So you make a new folder in the root of your USB called PS3 with caps. In that folder, make another folder called Update. This should also be in caps. Inside Update, you have to drag in the custom firmware you want to install. Remember, you have to be on 3.55. I want to just rub this into your head, make it as explicit as possible. So here's Kmeow, okay, and it doesn't matter quite yet what it's called. I'll show you what to rename it if it's the wrong name. So just drag it in there. It's 170,000 kilobytes or like 170 megabytes, so might take a minute, but I'll skip through it. Alright, so now it should be copied inside the update folder. I'm going to go back and just recap what you should have. In the root of your USB, folder called PS3, all caps. Inside there, a folder called Update in all caps. Inside there, you should have this custom firmware .pup file. Okay, it should always be PUP, but sometimes, if it's not called PS3 updat, it might be called something else. You want to change it to PS3 updat. So I'm just going to erase that. Let's say it was called Kmeow. Okay, you cannot put this in your PS3. I mean, you can, but you'll get an error when you install it. So what you want to do is just rename it to PS3. Remember, all caps. My bad there. So PS3 updat. So there's no e at the end. Just PS3 updat. .pup. Okay, again, this is a custom firmware for 3.55. So again, if your PS3 is on 3.55, you can go ahead and install this. So now, just take the USB out of your computer. You could safely eject it, but I'm too lazy to do that. So what you're going to want to do is plug this USB in the right-hand slot of your PS3, not the left, but the right. So there are two USB ports in your PS3. You want to plug this to the right one. Make sure it's the right one. Whenever you're modding, by the way, this is just a rule of thumb. You want to use the right-hand slot as much as possible, because that's going to be the most effective and it's going to prevent any boo-boos. So once it's in the right-hand slot of your PS3, you can just go ahead and scroll up to, again, the Settings tab, and go up to the top and click System Update. You're going to want to click Update via Storage Media. So if you're on an official firmware 3.55, then you're not going to see all this, like the screen might be a little bit different, but you're still going to see something called Update via Storage Media. So you want to click on that nonetheless. And it'll say scanning, and it should find this 3.55 PS3 updat.pup. So just go ahead and click on it. That's all you want to do. And it'll do this process. So it's fairly long. I'll be back when it's done. So when this is done, you should be able to see that in the game section of your PS3, you have something called Install Package Files and App Home right here. So these two are basically what make the biggest difference between an official firmware and a custom firmware PS3. An official firmware does not have these two, but a custom firmware does. So what is install package files? I know I'm going to cover a lot in this video, but just pull through. This is a lot of information you should know. It's very basic. So install package files. Basically, these are apps below. I've already installed some. So install package files basically allows you to install third-party apps that you could get online to download from the internet. So it's kind of like if you were to download a game via PlayStation Store, and then you buy it, and it would download. It would save here. You'd see it right here, just like you see these. It's kind of like the same idea, except you're allowed to install whatever you want downloaded from the internet, and these give you some really cool features that you could do. And this is pretty much the portal to modding. This allows you to mod. So, there are things like FTP and, like file managers, all that. I'll talk about that in another video. But we've covered a lot of basic ground, a lot of good knowledge to know, even if you're not, planning on modding. So, I guess I'll just end it off here for today. Thank you for watching. I hope this was useful. I hope, this answered some questions and you have an idea of what modding is. And again, this series will go on. I'll talk about a lot of stuff. So, see you later.